And that was great. It was exactly what I needed, and I didn't know I needed it until I got there and experienced it, watched this movie, cried my eyeballs out. Crying is good for you. Yep. The holistic psychologist did like 9 slides on why crying is important.
I love that. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I hear what you're saying is that you kind of were resistant to it, and then once you got into it, your feelings of the grief didn't go away, right? It's still kind of just sitting there.
Yep, right next to me.
Right? And both of these can be true. Okay, so here we are.
Okay, I'm eating some Nothing Bundt cake. Where are they located?
Christiana. Near Christiana? Like near the Home Depot?
Really?
Where the TJ Maxx is? Like in that area?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, so...
Shout out to Nothing Bundt cake.
Yeah, delicious little cakes. Why are we eating Nothing Bundt cake? Because Jennifer celebrated her 44th birthday yesterday, which is November 17th.
Yeah, November 17th. That's my birthday. I am a Scorpio all the way through. I think my picture's next to Scorpio in the Bible?
The Book of Astrology?
That's it.
Yeah.
Oh, we're on point today.
We certainly are. We are on the struggle bus.
Yep. Sometimes I just live there.
Yeah, and that's okay, right? Because we're not perfect all of the time or any of the time, and nobody is. So
yeah,
we're here. And I think it's important to, we're showing up and
talking about the things
because, you know,
because we have a legal obligation.
No, because showing up is important even when you feel like you're quote unquote a little messy, because life is messy, grief is messy, everything is messy. Yeah. And
when you don't wanna.
Right. And we're both recovering perfectionists.
People
pleasers and all of the things, and it would be very easy to say, I'm not on point today, which is 100% true. I'm not. And I also don't feel well, so I might have a real I don't know, the word claggy came to mind, but I've also been watching the most recent episode of British Bake Off, so don't even know what claggy is.
I know.
Or even in reference to baked goods, but what came to mind is I'm feeling a little claggy. So maybe my sinuses are as well.
I wonder if that is it. We'll have to Google it and put it in the show notes that I realize we never ever actually do. I need to go back in time.
I'm the one. Well, I put it in the social media posts.
Good for you.
Not everything, but things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're here and we're showing up as humans, perfectly imperfect.
Yeah.
On the struggle bus.
Even when you don't want to. I saw a post recently by Trainer Mommy. Shout out to Nicole that you know, like sometimes you got to do even when you don't want to, getting up and doing it. That's when it, you know, is important. She's, of course, referring to health and fitness related things, mostly about strength and just feeling strong, which is why I love her and her content, because it's about being strong and
not about your body and diet culture.
Yes, very much so. And it's just very, very realistic. But it's in the same vein of what we're just talking about. It's like sometimes you don't want to, and I feel like with the time change and the weather change, and it's just kind of like, and you have said like this is classically vegetative state. No. Hibernation state. Yes. Because I think in a lot of ways it is. I
mean, really, when you think about it, right? I'm not a scientist, not a historian. I'm none of those things.
You've been lying to me?
Yes, all of the time. But in thinking historically speaking, if we go back to the beginning of time and humans, whenever that was, I would guess, again, not a history major or, you know, anthropology or anything, but wouldn't this be the time of the year in the seasons when it would be we would be getting ready for the barren season, the winter, when there's not a lot to harvest. Food is scarce. So we're trying to hunker down like a squirrel and eat all of the things. And I think genetically speaking, my body is still in hibernation mode when it starts to get cold. It's like, let's eat food. Let's find comfort. Yeah. Let's get cozy. Because as they said on Game of Thrones, winter is coming.
I love how you work in quotes. I have never seen that series. I do not want to see that series. But I know the rest of the humanity has seen that. And I do know enough to know about who John Winter is. Is that his name?
Jon Snow.
But, maybe this is going to get edited out.
But he lived at Winterfell. So his family's from Winterfell.
Right.
It's all, it's none of it's real, but all of it makes sense. Yeah. So you're fine.
Yeah, right. Nonetheless, I know the winter is coming. And also hold the door or Hodor. Whatever. I need to stop talking about this.
We are completely substance free.
Believe it or not.
Other than the sugar that Jen has consumed from her nothing bundt cake.
I did. It's delicious. It is a pumpkin spice with cream cheese icing, everybody. And if you haven't had cream cheese icing, you're denying yourself literal heaven.
It is. And the great thing about a bundt cake is there's a hole in the middle, and these people fill it with cream cheese frosting that is delightful.
It's like a dream.
Yeah. It is a dream.
So I never heard of these folks before, but now Crystal has turned me on to them, and they're a local business, I imagine.
They're a franchise.
Well,
I only know about them. Yeah, Allie told me about them when we were in New Jersey one time, and now
they popped up.
There's one here, and there's also one somewhere in Wilmington.
Okay, well, again, we're just nailing it all the way. You can go eat this deliciousness. But right, so it is a time of like, I don't feel like it, and I think also as we approach some of the typical, or we'll say traditional American holidays, I know it's celebrated other places as well, but the ones that like the dominant culture tends to celebrate, right? Thanksgiving, Christmas being a huge juggernaut of a holiday, and what they represent typically, or what they I think are supposed to represent, is like family and connection and joy and the things that where we see a lot, or see on TV, or see in commercials, or maybe even some of our friends or colleagues actually have that life.
The hallmark of families and holidays, and
yeah,
and
they can be joyous, and especially when you're with your, I think, chosen family and those kinds of things. But I think it's important to kind of, for those of us who are out there who it isn't that, there's sometimes we feel guilty or weird or wrong, or just not connected, that holidays actually for some folks are kind of challenging and emotional, whether it's related to grief, because the folks that were used to being here or would prefer to be here are no longer, or the grief of just not having the ideal family in the way that you want it to be. It can be a really hard time. I think I know I didn't know that for a long time growing up, and I would hear people say it, but it took a while to actually resonate with me, the fact that it can be confusing to feel sad and disconnected and very lonely and very isolated. And even on top of that, because it is a time for family, that we even further stay isolated, because I don't want to bother you. You're with your family. This is the time for family. This isn't, I'm not part of your family. So we don't reach out, and we stay disconnected from people who would love us to stay connected, or at least check in, or have no idea that we're kind of struggling. And I think a good number of us, I'll definitely speak for myself, that when I'm struggling emotionally, or just kind of going through it and I kind of can't fix myself, I tend to withdraw and like kind of hide, whether it's hide behind kind of a false I'm okay, it's fine, and try to get out of the situation as soon as humanly possible, or hide, like withdraw, I don't reach out as much, I'm not as responsive to friends, or I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm fine, everything's cool, and kind of keep it that way.
Yeah, all of that. But when the people who know you, they're able to crack through all of that and kind of see the, response of, yeah, everything's cool. And I'm like, no, but really, how is it? Like, for real? And sometimes you're just not in a place where you want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. Giving space for that and understanding and just offering support. It's very easy to want to self-isolate and be alone when struggling with certain things, especially when it comes to like grief. And in talking to Jane about the podcast, she had this idea of like we could have a what I wish I knew about kind of thing, right?
Oh, a segment.
That, or like an episode where people come on like, what I wish I'd known about X. And so
I like this. Thank you, Jane.
Yeah. So in thinking about that, it's kind of like, for me, if I adopt that, what I wish I would have known about grief and the holidays kind of thing. And I know you and I have talked a lot about that recently, or grief in general. I mean, our whole podcast is about grief, but I think you experienced recently with Halloween, some grief that surfaced regarding that, and how it's just a reminder of how things are different. So, we've talked about on the podcast that your family's house burned down 8 months ago now.
Yeah, it is. It's 8 months. Yeah.
Yeah. Time really does fly, even when you're not having fun. It's going to go whenever.
Sure is.
But
time flies when you're getting older.
Yeah. Sorry. But for Halloween, you had a situation that arose that I think kind of surprised you. Yeah. So in this effort of what I wish I would have known about grief, the holidays.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about that, about Halloween. And, Halloween is a holiday that some people celebrate, some people don't. It's not thought to be like a major holiday,
like in the family holiday,
in the quote unquote traditional sense. It is a fun holiday.
Sure, yeah.
And there are fun activities that can be done or, thought of or associated with that. One of which being pumpkin picking and pumpkin carving. And I think that's when you had like this realization and this wave of grief that kind of snuck up on you when it came to doing the pumpkin carving with your family.
Yeah, because Halloween often is the kickoff in in capitalism of like the holiday season, right? As soon as everyone always says, I shouldn't say, a lot of folks say right before Halloween's over, oh my gosh, they have Christmas stuff out already. Let us have Thanksgiving first. Every season I hear that. And I'm like, yeah, because Halloween is that kind of demarcation of like, here we go, right? And it just wasn't in the forefront of my mind, but retrospectively I can see, oh yeah, of course, right? The act of trick-or-treating often for folks is you go around your neighborhood, if that's your situation, right? So carving pumpkins and and reaching for the tools that I used to have, for pumpkin carving, and being like, oh, right, I don't have those. That reminder that comes up until you go to reach for it. I don't reach for pumpkin carving tools until, and we figured it out and it was fine. But it was just that little tap on the door of like, no. And I even thought to myself, oh, it's just right up. No, it's not. That's not where our stuff is. Or right down there in the basement, whatever. It's not there. And then progressing on to, shortly we carved pumpkins not too long before Halloween. So then progressing to Halloween, which I was able to spend with a close friend who is like family, and hang out there and eat. Things were kind of just taken care of. It was actually very nice in that way, but it left my state of being kind of just depressed, right? Just sort of, and I mean, yeah, sure, the emotional state of depression, but also just like your body and just kind of your existence is just like, you know, where I felt like I was like moving in quicksand, and I didn't really want to participate in the walking around part. But there were several adults that were around, so people kind of took different shifts, and I helped hand out candy, which was just really sitting next to a fire, which I still enjoy a campfire. I really enjoy that experience. House fire did not ruin that for me. And I allowed myself to do that, which was also, you know, unique in the sense that I didn't push myself for that perfectionism or people pleasing for my kids, because I do want to show up for my kids, but they were fine walking around with their dad and walking around with other, you know, friends or buddies that were, you know, friends of this, you know, my friend Jen. And it was actually great. It was like fun, very fun for them. And I just felt like I was in this other world of just kind of like, it was just slow and it was just surprisingly hard. And I think you've said this many times, but it's just that reminder, that unexpected grief that shows up that you're like, oh yeah. And retrospectively, yes, I can see, of course, right? But in the moment, I was like, what are you doing here? I'm busy carving pumpkins, trying to pretend like everything's fine and be joyous with our family and look at our pumpkins. And it was a fun time. We figured it out and everybody did their thing, and it was an opportunity to be creative and put our little pumpkins outside of the house that we were staying in. Because we can't not create memories, right, in this house, even though part of me is like, I just want to just get through it. Just, no, we don't even live here. We're not even going to remember this. That's not true and real and authentic, but there is definitely a part of me that wants to just shut down for the next year and and not, you know. But that's not realistic either, I guess. So it's the unexpectedness of it, and it's the you know, and then what happens in it, and like allowing yourself to do it. But also, I think the critical piece there was connection in it. Even though there's a good part of me that didn't want to, actually. Right? I just want to be like, can you just leave me alone? I'm going to hide over here. You guys go ahead, and I'll just be under this rock if you don't mind. But it was the connection in it that actually was relieving, and the validation in it, right? And also, I think they're struggling with, I don't want to burden you. A lot of us, I don't want to burden anybody with my crap, be such a Douglas Downer, you know. You may know this phrase as Debbie Downer, but that's a gendered and sexist thing. So I'm just going to flip it on its head and call myself you know, I don't want to be a Douglas Downer. Or,
I thought it was Dennis.
Oh, Dennis Downer?
It could be either.
Dougie Downer? And fill in any traditional, non-traditional name that you would normally put there, right?
Oh, no, it's Negative Nick instead of Negative Nelly.
Yeah, Negative Nick. Because you know how Nicks be. I'm just kidding. But I just like to do that with language. I think it's fun to flip it around. And it's kind of jarring because when we talk about Negative Nelly, Negative Nancy, those are traditionally women's names. Like how ingrained in our society it is just to be like, she's difficult. She's, right. You know. So I just think it's fun to flip it sometimes, and people get a little like, oh, well, yeah, what about it? But anyway, I digress. So the connection in it, in spite of the fear of being burdensome, and allowing to just be what I was feeling instead of pushing through and putting a fake face on, which I do sometimes, and sometimes it's authentic, and sometimes I feel okay. But in that scenario, I just was what I was.
Well, I think it's interesting that you say that, because as you're talking, I'm thinking back to the first Christmas after my mom died. So, which would have been about 3 months after she died. And I remember you reaching out to me on Christmas Eve, mm-hmm. wanting me to go to the movies with your family.
Yeah.
And typically speaking, actually, most Christmas Eves, except for that was the first one. No, the year before COVID, so 2020, typically I would go Christmas Eve to my friend Dennis that I grew up with, to his family's house for like Feast of the Seven Fishes, but not really, but for this big like seafood dinner. And I would be there, and COVID, we couldn't do it in 2020. And then in 2021, his parents moved from Dover to Pennsylvania. So what I typically would have done, I couldn't do because of that. And then, you know, my mom's dead.
Right.
And so you invited me to go to the movies to see Encanto.
Yeah, it was Encanto. That's right.
Yeah, Encanto with your family. And I think I surprised myself and you when I said yes.
Yeah, you did. I was like, she's going to say no. Sorry, I'm eating some of my nothing bundt cake.
Yeah, so she expected me to say no, which the text actually said, oh, wow, I didn't expect you to say yes, which is not to mean that she just blanket statement invited me in the hopes that I would say no. It's just that's who I am. In speaking about connection, is that typically I do want to be by myself and feel those things. But I've learned on this journey, and I've spoke about it before, how I've found that connection and community has been very vital to me. And that day was especially true, where the great thing about Jen, though, and why I said yes, was because I know I can, and with Marcus and with the family, right? I can show up exactly who I am without having to be anything other than what I am. So went to this movie.
Oh, it was an emotional movie too.
I mean, hello, the beginning, whatever little short, I'm like yelling at Jen. I'm like, what are you even doing to me? Like, why are we watching this? I can't.
We're both crying.
I'm like, I can't even get through the short about a raccoon that's like continuing the generational like cycle of violence. And I'm like,
and correcting for it.
And then
in this like 8-minute short.
I'm like, darn it. But anyway, all of that to say that yes, I met up with her family, went to the movies, and then went home. And that was great. It was exactly what I needed, and I didn't know I needed it until I got there and experienced it, watched this movie, cried my eyeballs out. Crying is good for you. Yep. The holistic psychologist did like 9 slides on why crying is important.
I love that.
So yeah, I hear what you're saying, is that you kind of were resistant to it, and then once you got into it, your feelings of the grief didn't go away, right? It's still kind of just sitting there.
Yep, right next to me.
Right? And both of these can be true.
Yeah, and I think even if we let ourselves dive in a little bit, because you said like our whole podcast is about grief. It is. It really, we've, in finding our way in this, I think it's grief and trauma and how they hang out together, how they're separate from each other, how they override each other, what they do to us, right? And I think that really, it really kind of represents who we are as people, like, grief and how passionate you are about it, and personal experience with it, and then trauma.
How we're both super traumatized, but who isn't?
Well, it's just, right, and I think culturally, our society is traumatizing, and it is just an expectation that, like, you'll be traumatized because life is traumatizing. Yes, there are parts of it that absolutely are, but the ways in which we're expected to be like, well, it's kind of crazy, that just society is traumatizing. Then, of course, if you're not a white male, cisgender, heterosexual, able-bodied person, and other things too, how then it becomes more and more and more and more traumatizing. Every area of privilege you don't occupy, right? And that's just like, well, this is what it is, So society in general, traumatizing. I think we've said that kabillion times. I'll say it every day, all the time. But on top of that as well, just what we've learned, whether it's societally or in our families, about when we're not feeling okay, right? Some of us can remember or have heard other families, parents be like, fix your face. I don't want to see that. I'll
give you something to cry about.
I'll give you something to cry about. And those are just, a couple of fun ones, like that were socially accepted, and probably in some ways still are. Like the things that we do or we believe are acceptable as parenting is still highly traumatizing and arguably abusive, at least on the emotional level. In this idea of like, I'll give you something to cry about. So what do you learn from that, right? Don't show it. Or I want to cry and I want to talk about it, but then your parents maybe or your caregivers or whoever who took care of you, if anyone, right? They're not available, and even if it's for good reason, because they had to work 2 jobs, like this, because they were trying to sustain the household. But it's still no one's there. Or I have tried to reach out. They don't understand me. They minimize and maybe even mock. So even if I try to reach out, people will not be receptive. So you get these messages along the way. No one says, "Hey, traumatized person, just so you know, we don't like it," in this explicit way. It's what we receive from society, from our own families, from legitimate situations, from abusive situations, and everywhere in between. That for most folks, there is no space for it. And for folks who maybe experience disappointment, there's no space for it. And when you do try, it doesn't matter. I'm not gonna be able to help you. So you either help yourself, become hyper independent. You don't want to be a burden. It's just another thing on this person's plate when you already know they're busy or they're having a hard time themselves. I don't want to be a burden. And so we kind of we hide for those reasons. It's not that we don't want the connection. We may not realize it, right? But ultimately, humans are connective people. We heal together. There's healing properties of being with people. There's co-regulation when you're with people. But our hyper-independent society says, no, need no one. In fact, not only that, if you don't need anyone and you've succeeded in life, we celebrate that. We think that's amazing and good for you, as opposed to being like, I'm so sorry that you had to do that by yourself. It's actually like revered. And so again, these messages keep getting reinforced, whether it's direct or indirect, covert or overt. Like, these things get ingrained, and then we take them in, and then this is what we do, right? And so when we actively go against that, it's a lot of unlearning, maybe even fear. Often I feel like a little bit like a little kid, where I'm like, oh my God, they're not gonna, if I ask for this, they're gonna not want to be my friend anymore. They're gonna think I'm too much. And that's just not true. If someone can't show up for you in that moment, especially our chosen family, people we've connected with, they may not show up for you in that moment because they can't answer the phone or whatever, but they want to show up. They want to be supportive. They want to connect. They want to offer a safe space. And when we invited you to our house after your mom died that Christmas, yeah, there was no expectation of how you had to show up. It wasn't like, and bring a dish, girl. Like, it was just be here. Do nothing. Cry, don't cry. Engage, don't engage. Sit in a room and shut the door, but just know we're right here. There's a lot of comfort and safety in that, I think. And when you're used to denying yourself that because of all the reasons, when you have it, it's almost like, oh, oh yeah, I totally forgot how helpful this is. And you'd think that would be like, right, so next time I won't do it. No, next time we do it again. And it takes a lot of repeated resistance to what our default setting is to be able to be like, I'm actually going to reach out and get support. And I don't think there's a time still where I'm not still kind of nervous that I'm like, I'm sorry to bother you. I hate to ask for this. And all it is just someone to listen to.
Yeah.
To listen to you.
Well, correct. Because I think, have both felt like burdens and throughout life and being too much or what have you. But, and thinking about the holidays and the pressure that's put on for it to be a certain way, or that it has to be a certain thing. And if you are doing something outside of what that quote unquote traditional expectation is, then people are like, oh, really? Oh, wow. Or you're not doing anything and that you're okay with that. Because there are times where I'm like, yeah, I'm not, and I'm okay with that. Like, people are worried about me. You're going to be home by yourself that night? Yeah, because that's what I want. Like, and that's what happened after my first Thanksgiving. I did spend it with my my family, And then I went home and I listened to a grief meditation in the bathtub and cried. And it felt very good. It felt very cleansing to be able to do that. And, you know, I'm finding that all of this is true about me, that I do like my alone time.
Right.
But I also am finding, especially in grief, especially around this time of year, that connection is very important. And how do we define connection? How do we find it? How do we define it? What does that look like? And, you know, I have, excuse me, since you've been on this little journey too, we've been able to talk about stuff. And somebody that I met on social media, Sydney from Shift Life Coaching, or Shift with Sydney Life Coaching, she and I have become friends, and we hosted our first free grief walk and talk through the woods earlier this month in November at Brecknock Park in Camden in Kent County, Delaware. Which was a really great experience for her and I, and for those that showed up, to be able to hold space.
Right.
You know, and we're holding another one December 2nd at Killens Pond State Park in Felton, Delaware. Park entrance fees are no longer in effect after November 30th. So this is a completely free event. And it's in December. We wanted to do it before it gets too cold.
Right.
But also in knowing that this is that time of the year where grief can be a little bit heavier for folks. And just having a space to be able to share your experience if you want to, or just to be with other people that get it. If there's inclement weather, we've decided we'll put a Zoom link on the Facebook event page for people who want to join virtually.
That's cool.
Her mom came to the last walk and mentioned something that she used to do with her in her profession that she used to have. She was a nurse. Something called Cup of Comfort. So it would just bring your favorite mug and have a cozy drink or have some soup. So we kind of would call it that too on Zoom, your cup of comfort, have like some tea or coffee or soup, and just kind of be cozy and do it virtually if we have to.
I love that. That's so cool. That it won't be canceled. It'll just morph and shift. Oh, shift. What's it mean?
Yeah.
But I meant that really. It'll just shift, into something else, but still that connection.
Yeah, still being able to be present with each other.
Why nature? Why walking around in nature? Why do you choose that?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. When I do more research, when I do more research, I'll be able to give all the ins and outs from that angle. But from my own personal experience, right? We are the experts in our own experiences. Always, nature has been a place of comfort and peace for me. And I remember years ago that having a really bad day, fortunately for me where I live, I'm like, 30 to 40 minutes away from the beach, from an ocean beach. And I would drive down, I don't care what time of year it is, just to go be near the ocean, to hear the waves and to smell the salt air. And it would help clear my mind. And that has been especially true over the past couple of years. I mean, even during the pandemic when we were allowed to be outside, I would seek out, to go hiking. And since my mom has died, being in nature has brought me a lot of comfort and a lot of peace and connection. And in reading the book, The Nature Fix, it mentions basically about how we all just need to get back into more nature and how beneficial it is for our mental, emotional, physical, spiritual bodies. But forest bathing, the Japanese term for it, I'm gonna not say it correctly, Shorin-yuku, or I'll have to look that up, but forest bathing. And basically immersing your senses in nature.
Yeah.
And being fully present. And I know I was talking to you about this, about how when I go on for walks now, instead of taking my AirPods and listening to music or a podcast, I'm trying to be fully present in the space where I am. And I've been able to actually see things that I typically wouldn't see, hear things, smell things, and just fully engage wholeheartedly my whole self into this experience. And it's been quite beautiful. I mean, this week I've had some rough days. Thanksgiving is soon, and for me, my grief shows up several weeks before a significant holiday or date, and it just really overwhelms my system.
Yeah.
And I've been taking moments to be out in nature. So I'll go for walks, and then I'll take my journal and sit at the nature center at Killen's Pond and journal and overlook like the pond and the forest. And it's really like mind-boggling to me that I'm in Delaware, because it doesn't look like I'm in Delaware.
I know. We said when we go into Lum's Pond, it feels like, which isn't that different from Killen's Pond,
right?
That it's like, feels like you just walked into a different zone.
Yeah, and it's just, on my walk this week, I listened to a grief walking meditation that is on the Insight Timer from somebody that I met also on Instagram. Dan, he lives in Malaysia. And I was listening to that, walking through the forest, and it was a grounding exercise and really being present. And it was just, I immediately feel my mood shift, which again, research shows that being in nature lowers your blood pressure, your anxiety, your cortisol levels, like you breathe better. There's literal like things in the soil that are good for you.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like we're made to be in the like nature and on the earth and experiencing it.
We're meant to have these immersive experiences. So that when Sydney and I chatted about this one that we had in November, we both feel so strongly about being in nature and how healing and cathartic it is, and just a lot of peace. And I can't really explain it, but if you know kind of thing, like just this feeling that I get of I immediately feel less stressed. And
there's tons and tons of research out there about that, right? You just read the book, a book on it in the trauma world. That is a highly therapeutic tool that's utilized. A lot of therapists, and during COVID, this was a thing that was helpful. And I think in general, a lot of therapists will tell you this walk and talk
therapy,
right? Where you literally walk and talk. And there's also this, I'm not going to get too far deep into this because I'm not a sciencey person, but the idea of bilateral stimulation being helpful. It's bilateral stimulation is utilized in EMDR therapy. What does it stand for? Eye movement desensitization, and then R.
Something.
Yeah. I'm not a EMDR practitioner, but I know some folks who are. But the idea of bilateral stimulation helping with kind of rewiring some stuff related to trauma. And when you're walking, just simply walking and moving your body, your bilateral stimulation of moving your legs, right? They're bilateral, your arms, your body. There's a lot of healing purposes in that, or not healing elements, right? In nature, just hiking, moving, walking.
Well, and feeling grounded, you're feeling your heels touch down, like it's grounding you into the present moment.
And the walk and talk therapy, it also, while you're, you're talking, while you're physically doing this, there's a lot of value in that too, especially if you struggle with eye contact, or you are somebody who's just nervous to look somebody in the eye when you're telling hard things. You're just next to them walking.
It's hard. I mean, I've always found that to be true in the dating world too. Again, no scientific like background for anything, just like my own experiences and feelings, but it was always easier to have an active date.
Yeah.
Like doing an activity rather than sitting across from somebody having a meal, because that's awkward. First of all, you're talking to somebody while you're trying to eat, and okay. And so my thought when outside of this walk and talk, but in doing this grief stuff, part of my services, the one-on-one stuff, is like the option of having our session in nature
Mm-hmm.
for that very reason of it's a little awkward sometimes to talk about difficult stuff when you're just looking at somebody.
Yeah.
So doing something, and again, being in nature is healing, and there's all this research behind it. And so that brings us back to this walk. Same idea of gathering in a space for people to have a shared experience, and if they want to share their story, they can, but in walking. And that's what we did. There was a small group of us. We introduced ourselves, told a little bit about why we were there. I have these cards, Nature Meditation Deck by Kenya Jackson Salters. And they're brilliant cards. I've probably talked about them before. And
Marcus and I just used one of them, gifted by you, the deck. And Marcus and I just used one when we took our dog to the dog park at Lum's Pond, and before we got out, we used one of them, and it was really cool.
Yeah, so there are 4 different topics, I guess, like walking affirmations, messages from the earth, 2 other things. But anyway, everybody drew a card if they wanted to participate. They read their card out loud if they wanted to, and it was something to just kind of carry with you on your walk, which was great. Everybody loved the cards. And in speaking to other folks about like nature, one of the women that I was talking to, her dad passed away relatively recently. He died by suicide. And she said that nature is like the place that she has to go to. And I was like, I get that. Like, you know, and so it's not just me, it's other things, you know, there's a lot as far as like grief and all of the things as far as being in nature. So that's why we picked that, because, you know, it's healing, and there's no expectations, right? You're in nature, and the only expectation is to just be there.
Yeah.
And
being so present.
Being present and immersed and engaging all of your senses, it's very easy to be disconnected.
Especially folks who are, I think a lot of folks, right? But in trauma, right? A common trauma response is dissociation.
Yeah.
And to kind of counter that, to bring you back down, right, is to engage your senses. So what do you smell?
What do you see?
Right.
What do you hear?
Here you go. I mean, again, it's just like, all these obvious reasons, because when you can do that in any room, obviously, any place you can do that. It's a great exercise in general if you're just feeling anxious, to just kind of ground yourself back down. But the aliveness of nature, even when leaves are falling,
and there's the beauty in that, right? Even in like metaphorically speaking, you know, these trees are shedding the things that no longer serve them. They're letting go.
And they go to the ground and enrich the
soil.
They're
rooting in. They're and you feel like it's dead, right? It looks dead, it's barren, but beneath the surface, these magical things are happening. It's like alchemy. And it's preparing for the next season to become stronger, to come back and like
enriched, and all on its own. There's and when you're in nature, ideally nothing is contrived, right? Or mostly nothing is contrived, where you're just there on a path and the nature's naturing, you know, and you're there to bear witness to it. It's bigger than you. It's something bigger than you. If there's a spiritual element to that, because you didn't put those trees there, you know, and I know people plant trees, but I'm just saying, like, this is something that you're in, that has nothing to do with you. It existed well before you. It'll exist well after you. It's alive. It's bigger than you. It's life without your intervention, and this like sort of human intervention that's often the case. And again, I know state park, I mean, the trail you're on is obviously you know, paved or pushed through by humans, but just in general, to be that present in something that's bigger than you, and just to be in awe of that, however that looks, is super powerful.
And to also just bear witness to the cycle of it, you know, in speaking about death, this cycle of life. And I think one of the cards in that deck actually has something to do about death and like the cycle of life. And you know, for me, I go to Killen's Pond a lot. It's not too far from my house, but as a person who goes there often, I'm able to bear witness to every season in this space and of the plants and the species that live there and the trees, and being able to watch, you know, them in full bloom and vibrant, and then coming into fall and now winter, and, you know, starting that whole cycle over. And, you know, you can't help but kind of see it in a smaller scale of our own lives and life in general.
Yeah. Without the intervention. Like, it's just what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Like, the leaves are always going to fall, and they're always going to hit the ground and enrich the soil, and then they're going to grow more, you know, and it's going to be the cycle without intervention. Just like, I think, like no matter what we do, we're going to go through these cycles where our leaves are going to fall, and sometimes we're going to be more wobbly, more barren, more, you know, naked, and then other times we're going to be enriched and vibrant, and at the end of it all, there is an end.
Yeah, that's why I like to, when we do tree pose in some of my yoga classes, and, you know, people are wobbling and people feel unsteady or self-conscious or, oh my God, I couldn't do it. And, you know, I'm like, if you wobble, it's okay, because the trees also blow in the wind.
Yeah.
And they bend and sway. And guess what? It's okay. And it's okay if you do too. Like, you just try again. Like, nothing is perfect.
Yeah.
So take a lesson from the trees.
Yeah. It is such a, and you know, we are fortunate to be in this little state where we do get to see all 4 seasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we get to be close to an ocean beach that is, you know, it may not be crystal clear blue water, but it is another thing that is alive and moving and swaying, and, you know, it's another thing to be in awe of that's just, you know, bigger than you.
Yeah. That's another place that I went a couple of weeks ago, because, you know, one of the beautiful things about choosing the life that I've chosen is having some flexibility in my schedule and being able to do these things I wouldn't typically be able to do, which is a conversation that Sydney and I met at Killen's Pond earlier this week for a walk. And, you know, we're both entrepreneurs, and that can be a struggle. And if you are one, you know that it is a struggle. And social media is a big part of that, and feeling like you're not enough, that you're not doing enough. You're seeing other people, they're always active, they have all these followers, they must be doing great. And there's this constant comparison. And that's very hard to not experience that when you're kind of having these feelings of lack and not feeling worthy. And, you know, we had a conversation about, you know, well, the other day I went to yoga and then I didn't do anything the rest of the day, and I felt like such a failure that I wasn't doing stuff. And, you know, I feel that way too, because if you're an entrepreneur, your work schedule isn't the typical work schedule, right? And in speaking to her, I was like, I'm going to pull a Jen here, and everything she was experiencing this week was me last week, right? And I'm like, can we reframe that? Like, think about it. And I was like, I have to remind myself of this too. Like, remember when you had the typical job and you were having a griefy day, and like you had to just push through it, and how you would have given anything to not? Well, we have that now.
Yeah.
So you were able to like honor what you needed. Yeah. So it wasn't really nothing. It was It was rest, right? It was revitalization, honoring what you needed. And that's, I think sometimes we need that reminder of, it's very easy to say it, but when it's your own experience.
Well, and thinking about just the connection that, you know, through the connection that you two have, and she's able to share this with you, you're able to help her reframe it, get out of that, you know, silo that can be entrepreneurship, especially with like coaching and grief work and yoga instructor, like these jobs that really it's just you, right? It's just Shift with Sydney, not Shift with Sydney and Friends, although, you know, that would also be cute and a great little title. But it's just her, right? So had you girls or women not connected, like you can have this kind of conversation. And I think that just goes a little bit step further into the beauty of non-dominance, non-capitalistic mindset. It's not that when you're an entrepreneur, sure, you want to make money, you want to survive, you want to even thrive and have a successful business, but not in a way that's exploitative and let me, sidle up to this business owner so I can take their information, or, it's actually quite connective and celebratory, right? I think the more women I continue to meet, women business owners I continue to meet, with this idea of celebrating each other, lifting each other up, being each other's cheerleaders, is highly contradictory to a traditional entrepreneur, cutthroat, capitalist society.
And scarcity mentality type of thing. So I think I remember her and I talking that it's very, in having these conversations of like, man, I was having those same struggles last week, Sydney. Like, you're literally in my brain from last week. Yeah. All of the things, wanting to give up. I'm not good enough. Blah, blah, blah. I'm not doing enough.
Which is crazy, because looking at her website and her stuff, I'm like, look at her. She's just doing the
thing. Right. We're all feeling that.
Yeah.
But I'm like, this is also true in our grief, which we have found that it can be very isolating and lonely. Mm-hmm. But once we like find other people, we can have that shared experience of like, oh my gosh, like I've also experienced that. Mm-hmm. I am experiencing that. Wow, okay. Because social media and life in general, it always looks like to other people that everything is wonderful.
Yeah.
And sometimes it really is.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's really not, but that's the gloss. That's what social media is. And that kind of brings us to like when I was at the beginning, I'm like, we're kind of on the struggle bus today.
Yeah.
And we're a little bit messy. And this might not be super coherent, which really isn't
ever. We
always
wonder.
But it's like I'm in a brain fog. I have a cold. I got allergies. I got other stuff going on. Yeah. And it's just like blah, blah, blah. But we're still here. We're still showing up because yes, Marcus will edit stuff, but human nature is not all glossy.
It is not, right.
We're going to have the struggles, and I think that it's relatable to say the things like, we're struggling, dude. Like, the grief is hard, the allergies, the colds, the
darkness.
I mean, it's winter. It's going to be well, okay, sure. We have like a month until winter, but we're getting into those days. Like everybody wants to hibernate. There's going to be less sunshine. Luckily, we've had a lot, but like, the seasonal affective disorder, the lack of vitamin D, the just wanting to burrow in a blanket until the spring time.
Which is also, right, there's okayness to that.
And that's okay too, because it's our body's way. We need to rest. We need to slow down. We need more sleep. We need all of the things, which, it's part of this great unlearning of.
It is. And then I think we're just, the times where it becomes problematic or worrisome or whatever is when we just feel ourselves being like, okay, this is beyond, I'm just listening to my body, doing what I need to do, listening to the grief and, taking care of myself. And it's like, I feel sad. Feeling sad is okay, right? But it feels like an elongation of sadness and withdrawal and disconnection that it's like, okay, that this isn't the answer. And like you said earlier, sometimes in your grief you do want to be alone, and there's nothing wrong with that. The human connection is important, but so is that honoring that alone time. It's just, am I doing the alone time because I don't want to be a burden? Because I don't want to, they're not going to help me anyway, or I'm just too much, or is that the narrative? Or it's just like, no, I just want to be alone by myself right now. And I think one of the times, it was in September, I want to say last year, that you did both, right? Initially you were like, I just want to be alone by myself.
For my mom's death anniversary?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
And you decided to take time for yourself, and then we also decided to connect, and we ended up it was a beautiful day. We went to the beach that day.
Right.
And both were great.
Yep. Which brought me to this year when we talked about on the podcast too, that we went to the beach this year, the day before my mom's death anniversary, me, you, and Jane, and had brunch and walked on the beach, even though the ocean was real wild because of storms.
Yeah.
But again, all three of us find peace and comfort being at the water and on the ocean. And Jane even tried skimboarding.
She sure did.
I mean, I'm like, who cares what anybody thinks about anything? First of all, nobody cares. And second of all, dude, we're legit here because my mom died like 2 years ago, and who knows what tomorrow's going to bring. So just try.
And she did.
If you fall, you get messy. Guess what? Right. There's a towel in the car.
Right. And it was impromptu, right? Like, so I know for myself, like, well, I don't have a bathing suit and I don't have the one towel that's blue and I can't.
Right. All of those things are true, but she's been saying the whole season, like, I really want to do this. I really want to do this. And I'm like, just let's do it. Like right now.
Yeah. And that's always cool. Again, in this connection that we can do that for each other. We can be like, just do it. Just go for it. And I really, again, it's like being each other's cheerleader. And sure, like, we don't know what tomorrow holds, but you knew she was nervous about it and wanted to do it, but was like, I don't know, people. And like, you can just be your cheerleader, and that gave her enough courage or the push to be like, yeah, F it, I'm gonna do it.
Right. All I think about is that episode of Schitt's Creek where David has to go for his driver's license renewal, and he's so worried, and Alexis is like, nobody cares.
Yeah.
And I'm the David. Yeah. I'm so David.
Yeah.
Anxious about everything. Things get dark. I could have been murdered by a serial killer in a basement. I get it, right? And she's like, nobody cares. Yeah. Like, literally nobody cares.
Yeah.
And that's all.
Because they're usually worried about their own selves and how
exactly.
They look.
And younger Crystal would have never been able to hear that, like, because so self-conscious and insecure and like, oh my God, everybody's gonna see. And there are still moments like that.
Yeah.
A lot less as I've gotten older. And as I always say, my mom dying, that's the baseline of how terrible is something. And oh well, I guess people might laugh at me. Guess I might get wet. Guess my hair is gonna look a mess.
Yeah, but also like.
What's the story that story is going to be the thing that matters at the end of the days. Like, did I allow myself to let my hair be messy and have sand on my face and get my clothes wet? Like the day I said a few weeks ago, I went down to the beach and I had my toes in the water and the waves were coming at me. My pants got wet. And I was like, you know what? I don't even care. Like, because my feet are in the ocean in October or November. It was in October. I was like, this doesn't happen here. Like, it was a relatively warm day. And then I, went and had this amazing lunch at this place and then started watching the sunset at a place at Cape Henlopen State Park that I've never gotten. It was just like mind-boggling and beautiful. And then I went home and did virtual grief yoga with my friend Kim. And I was just like, this is exactly what I needed all of this today.
Yeah.
It was a last minute decision to drop all the things and go to the beach, and zero regrets. And if you watch the movie We Are the Millers, then you get the no regrets. But if not, it's supposed to be no regrets. But
but I think that's really living. I think, also not only, I think just the more life experience we have. So life experiences. And so whether you're 20 and have been through a lot of experiences, or you're 40 something and you're like been through all the experiences and you're just tired of making sure your hair looks cute, and prioritizing that over joy and looking silly and being goofy and just trying something new. It's like, I really don't care. I remember seeing older women when I was younger, and it really just seemed like they gave no F's. And I was just like, I hope I never am like that, which that's kind of gross, to think it. I hoped I was never just like, not like let yourself go, but just like, not
just caught up in the ideology of what is good and great and what a woman
and womanly. And now that I am that, I'm like, oh, now, like, I don't care. I don't, and I whether the younger girls are looking at me like, oh my God, I'm like, right, you don't, when you arrive there, it's not like you're like unaware, right? Like, I hope I don't look silly, and you're just looking, you don't care. You don't care if your hair, and not everybody, I know this, just from my own experience. I don't care if my hair is done. And there's times where I certainly I do care about, but like, it's like, I know I'm choosing this. I'm not like oblivious and just been like, I guess I got older and gave up. No, I gave up and unsubscribed to the nonsense.
Right. I mean, sometimes it matters and other times it doesn't. And, I'm just like, I don't care about fashion. I literally live in cozy clothes most of the time, and other stuff is just like too much. I'm like, oh my God, how do you breathe? But
I think Jane and I are like, well, we care.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Because it's fun. It's fun. I like to wear fun, fun, like funky shoes. And I find joy in that, and wearing fun earrings and making things match. It's not like I'm like, subscribe to the patriarch. It's just like, I just.
Right. And if it makes you feel good about yourself and you're doing it for you, like, all of the things, right? Great. And it's a beautiful place to be there in the I don't cares. And then I think about it, I'm like, if I had not allowed myself to get my pants wet, would I have had that same experience? Or even last September, I went to, it was Labor Day weekend. I went down to the beach to stay with my friend Amanda overnight, and part of that experience was we went and did yoga on the beach in Bethany, which was a very magical experience for me. It was preceding my mom's first death anniversary. I had a real emotional experience, cried a lot, let it all go, and then unbeknownst to me, the tradition is after this yoga on the beach, you just go run and jump in the ocean fully clothed. And that is not for Crystal, right? Like, I'm like, I can't. I got these clothes on, right?
Yeah.
And I thought about it, and I was like, nah, I can't. And then I was like, you know what? Who says I can't? And I did. And, I had on pants and a shirt and the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And it was so unbelievably freeing to be able to feel like my pants floating in the water. Like, I could feel it. And yes, they were weighing me, but it was just like this buck against this, you shouldn't be doing it. And it was really beautiful. And I was telling Amanda, I was like, I had, she knew I was crying on the beach, and I was like, it just seems very like symbolic that I'm releasing all of these feelings, right? Doing yoga, releasing your tears are made of salt water, and here I am in the ocean, right? Being cleansed.
Yep.
And a little feather floated by, which for those who believe in signs, like I have lots that make me think of my mom, and I just really felt her with me. And I'm like, if I think about it often, and even that day, and I'm like, if I had stuck to my rigidity of like, I can't because I'm in clothes, I wouldn't have had this really like magical spiritual experience.
Yeah. And I think that really just the ways in which we are silenced and repressed and pulled down, and whether it's done to us or we then ingrain it in ourselves, the internalized oppression of ourselves, right? That what we miss out on, the joy,
it's like,
because it's just such a default setting to you, and not just simply because I'm wearing clothes, I don't have a bathing suit on, but it's just so much more than that. I can't. That would be silly. That would be goofy, childlike, like whatever it is, whatever conscious or not, that's telling us no. When you let yourself go, actually, what do I want? I want to. I want to let go. I want to release. A lot more acceptable, typically speaking, for boys and men and male identifying folks to be impulsive and reckless and I just lost the word. Gosh, that's my favorite. I love that, especially on a podcast. I love losing words. Like people who are just adventurous, right? No matter, that's so much more like, of course, and like, he or they don't even consider. It's just like, woo. Whereas there's just so much repression internally. When I think about it all the time. Actually, fairly recently, it was like dark out because it gets dark early, but I think it was even late, and I was like, I just want to go run. And then, there's a safety element, right?
Allegedly.
Oh. Right. And also just where our house is located.
Right.
There's no stupid sidewalk on
like that kind of safety. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, I don't want to get mowed down by a car. Also, put a sidewalk on Old Baltimore Pike. Come on. But I just, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go out and run. I had this energy, and it's not the first time. There's actually been several times where I've been like, I just want to go and run specifically. My body just wanted that. And no, I can't. Well, could I have, and then I thought about it. I really did wrestle with it. Can I go? What if I just jumped in my car and drove somewhere like the neighborhood where, that's bigger than the one we're staying in, that I could just run. It would just be on a sidewalk. It wouldn't, no, I can't, and just, but why not? And it, the frustration felt every time. I've just been noticing it echo more and more, that I'm like, if your body wants to run, it's telling you something, like,
right. Run. Honor what your body's telling you, what it needs.
No matter what, right? No matter if it is dark out, no matter, don't get run over, but like, there are ways around it. Instead of the no, I can't, no, I shouldn't, no, It's how.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think about lots of experiences that I've had, especially this year, that I could have very easily talked myself out of it. I mean, there was like one day Jane and I went to brunch at Schaefer's on the canal, I guess, and then she was telling me about this ice cream place in Chestertown, and we're like, we can't do that. I was like, we're out, let's go. Oh wait, by the way, then we discovered the cat colloquium because it's just there, let's go see that. Oh, and then on the drive home, let's stop at this winery. And like, we had this amazing unplanned day of like all of these great experiences, and it was connection to each other. It was lots of fun, and connection to animals, because cats, yay. I mean, I was in a fancy dress and I'm on the floor playing with cats because they just bring me so much joy, and to nature. So yeah, we started this whole this episode talking about connection and community, and it's more than just connection to each other human wise. It's connection to our stories, to our planet,
to ourselves,
to the animals, the nature, the whole planet. But we're all connected.
Yeah.
And
we're all supposed to be connected.
We're all supposed to be connected, and there are definitely cultures that celebrate that and honor it. And maybe another episode we can dive into it. But Marcus and I had a very deep conversation last Saturday about your trip to Japan, and hearing him talking about his experience in Japan and how different it was than American culture of the I culture, right? Me, and it's a we.
Right, it's a collective
It's
culture.
a collective, it's inclusive, it was welcoming.
And we know, we said we understood that, we're guests, we're travelers in this culture, but just these inherent differences that it's silent on public transportation because they don't want to be disrespectful to their fellow riders in case you're interrupting something that they are doing. Just simply that as part of the culture and expectation is like radically different than like, I don't care, that's your problem if I'm loud.
And the sense of safety.
Yeah, Marcus specifically, speaking as a Black man in a culture where I actually witnessed him be safe and feel safe. It was, in some ways, it was like he was a little bit of a different person. He felt lighter. I just observed it, and Marcus is always like, I don't like cities, I would never live in a city. And I'm like, I love cities. We're in Tokyo. He's like, I would move here. I'm like, what? Like, I mean, it was like, that was how pronounced it was, that like there was an airiness about him. And then ultimately it's super cool to watch, and also super painful to know the depths of how weighed down he is by racial trauma and just good old white supremacy here. And it's not to say that, like I said, Japan surely has its issues. The patriarchy is in fact strong there, but there was just this very acute difference in him that was just apparent and visceral and beautiful to see, and then very sad to to see as well. And then me being able to talk a little bit about like, that's how I feel in a good number of situations too, right? As a white person just moving through the world, I'm like, I don't think about these things. There's things I definitely think about as a woman, but not as a white person. And I think that freedom to move about generally is a specific freedom of white, all over the globe.
Well,
honestly.
White privilege,
white privilege and supremacy. Yeah.
So I guess we're leave that on a heavy note. But I guess we'll start wrapping up. So just a couple of tidbits here. And speaking about grief and nature and the connection and community, Sydney and I would love to have you join us at our next grief walk and talk through the woods, which will be December 2nd. It's a Saturday, 10 a.m. We're meeting at the Nature Center in Killens Pond State Park in Felton, Delaware. Again, park entrance fees are no longer in effect after November 30th. Also, if they're still doing that, just a side note, usually on Black Friday, all of the park entrance fees are waived for the opt-out side. Movement that started several years ago by REI to get outside rather than to do consumerism.
Which is, just note, REI is a company that sells things who is like,
we're closing down.
Things, but they're like, no, you go out.
Yep, we're closing down. But anyway, all of that to say, if you want to explore a state park and you don't want to pay an entrance fee, you can get in if they're still doing it. You got to check that, but free on Black Friday, and then they're all over after November 30th. So join us at Killen's Pond. There's no RSVP necessary. You can just show up. However, there is a Facebook event that was created for cohabitating with grief on Facebook, and Shift with Sydney. We're co-hosts of that event. You can also email me, Crystal at balancedmindjourney.com, if you have questions. In case of inclement weather, there will be a Zoom link provided on the day of the event in the Facebook event page. For those who would like to join virtually for we're going to call it Cup of Comfort, thanks to Sydney's mom, Patty's phrasing of that. I also have a free grief support group virtual on November 30th at 6:30 p.m. Registration is done on our website. A couple of grief healing circles, one at the Healing Cottage on December 15th, I think. That's a Friday. And then one at Shakti Yoga in Dover on December 10th. Again, all of that can be found on the website, on social media.
Website's balancedmindjourney.com/events.
Yeah. Yep. Postnatal Support Advocates is now a nonprofit. So if you're looking to looking to make a tax-deductible donation before the end of the year, you want to offload some cash, they would be happy to take that off your hands and do something really great for maternal mental wellness.
And there's a button now on our website where you can donate, because we
are fancy.
We are fancy.
Yeah.
So it's balancedmindjourney.com/PSA. There's a section toward the bottom that says donate, and if you click the button, it'll take you to PayPal, which it allows us to receive donations that way, which is super cool. It's super official.
Yeah, doing all the things. So thanks for joining us on another episode of Meet Me at the Cottage podcast.
We'll see you next time.
Yeah,
friends.
we're really grateful for you. I guess before we sign off, in the spirit of gratitude, perhaps we should, and Marcus, you can even pipe in from over on the other side of the door. You can tell us what to say.
That would be great. Or you can just get on the mic, because I know you feel comfortable doing that.
Something that we are grateful for.
I am grateful for my my family, and all that they teach me. Each individual one of them teaches me about themselves and myself.
Yeah. That keeps
me on my toes, keeps me growing, keeps me learning, keeps me loved and supported. Yeah, I think that is the main thing for me right now, as we go through some interesting times with my son Izzy, who's 7, and my daughter Felicity, who's 11. It's always something interesting and curious about these little creatures. And what are you grateful for?
Oh, goodness. Leave it to Jen to not have a basic sunshine answer. The sun is shining today. Sometimes it is like that. I think for me right now, what's going on in my brain is I'm really grateful for support and connection. I know that's what this podcast was about, but in coming in forms that I never really expected from people that I never saw coming into my life. And a lot of that is, social friendships that I've made via social media. Some are local, like Sydney, love her, and Kim in Rhode Island, and just being able to have these people to support and encourage and kind of hold space. And for you and for Jane and just really, it's been a year.
Yeah, sure. It always has been a year, damn it.
This has been probably one of the greatest years of my life, with some of the most amazing, magical experiences of my life. And it's also been a hard year.
Yeah.
As well, which, not alone on that. But yeah, so just support and connection, and allowing myself to be supported and connection, and to ask for help, and to lean on somebody.
Yeah. Take it in.
And to
allow yourself to have it. That is, I think, one of the most beautiful things that you can give yourself.
Which isn't something that I've always done relatively easy. So that's something I'm really grateful for, that I'm giving myself that permission to be supported and feel connection.
And how like critical that is. Every time you do it and let yourself do it, you're like, and myself included, oh yeah,
right. I just feel like, that was the right thing. I should be doing this. I'm gonna do this more.
Yeah,
I'm gonna do this more.
And then you arrive back at like, oh, I don't want to. But every time we ride that ride, it gets less and less, right? Like, I am going to. Or it's always great when your friends are like, nope, I can tell something's wrong. Stop it and tell me.
Yes.
Or we maybe say it more gently. Sometimes.
But Jen doesn't.
Sometimes I slide it in gently. And Marcus, what are you grateful for?
Coming through the doors, much like Moira on Schitt's Creek, he hath risen.
And he hath not moved.
I
saw the door
for
open.
those of us who cannot see this, he is removing his headphones, folks, and making his way.
Is he coming in on the mic?
Through the French doors.
He's coming in on the mic. Get closer.
Looking like he wants to stab both of us.
You gotta get closer to the mic.
I am grateful for the access to knowledge and the drive to be better.
Okay, all right. And
did anybody watch Def Comedy Jam?
God bless you.
Def Comedy Jam used to be on HBO, and our family actually had HBO. And at the end, they have all these comedians. Martin Lawrence hosted it, and at the end, Russell Simmons, I think it's Russell Simmons, who was the creator of the show, I believe.
Hasn't he now been canceled though?
Has he canceled? Oh no, has he? Martin Lawrence, you mean, or both?
Russell Simmons?
Shit, has he?
I don't know. That's
side this topic. Is just nostalgia. He would used to come on, and Martin Lawrence would always be like, "You got anything to say?" And every time you'd be like, "What is he?" And he always like, "What do you say, Marcus? Thank you, God bless, and good night." Thank you for coming out.
Yeah.
Is he saying yes?
Yeah. And I think he's steady Googling. Has Russell Simmons been? I thought it was something to do with like sexual assault or something. No. Look. I can't keep up with all the
sexual assault that gets found out after the fact, when 93,000 women come forward and then maybe they believe us. And if he has been canceled, I'm sorry to compare Marcus to Russell Simmons. Is he canceled?
Oh, lots of scandals.
Oh.
He was accused of assaulting and raping multiple women, including Def Jam executive Drew Dixon.
Oh my God! We just learned about Drew Dixon. She was on a, I believe. Now, please, yeah.
So, side note, we are not in any way condoning anything.
Thanks for letting me know who's canceled. He's been held accountable.
Yeah.
It has come out, right? But I think Drew Dixon was a woman who was on the show. It was a Netflix series about women in hip hop.
Oh, okay.
I think she was on that. And she mentioned, well, not just her. I don't know. Maybe she. Anyway, whatever. But Russell Simmons did say, "Thank you, God bless, and good night." And it was very monotone every time, never changed it. And the way Marcus just said what he was thankful for reminded me of that.
Yeah, well, Marcus is being very Marcus. And also, he looked like me if somebody were like, "Well, where do you want to say?" He's like, "I want to stab you in your eye. And I'm just going to say I'm grateful for this. Bye." Let me slink away back into my hole.
But it was like thoughtful. But he doesn't
concise.
Waste words.
No, right?
He's like, these are the things and goodbye. But on that note, everybody, Russell Simmons is a problem, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you, God bless, and good night.
right, let's go celebrate Jen.
And Jane.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, God bless, and good night.
I didn't know he was damn it, Russell Simmons!
Who's not problematic? Everybody's problematic.
I know, if you got a penis, you're a problem.
Sorry, Marcus.